All right, so today we're going to really get into something it's pretty fundamental when it comes to leadership. We're talking about trust. And to help us really get a grip on this, we're going to use one of John Maxwell's 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. This one's called the Law of Solid Ground. And we'll be looking at one of the videos from his leadership series on YouTube. It's a good one. It really cuts to the core of why trust is so important if you want to be a good leader.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how in the video Maxwell goes beyond just saying trust is important. He actually uses a really cool metaphor to explain why trust is so important. He says, trust is the glue that holds an organization and a leader together.
Ooh, I like that. It makes you think,
Wow.
like, what happens if that glue isn't there? Like, what are the consequences of not having trust in leadership?
Yeah, exactly. Without trust, you basically have, you just have people going off and doing their own thing, maybe even working against each other without realizing it. You just can't build a solid team or organization without trust.
No, you can't. It's like trying to build a house of cards. It'll all fall apart. So, uh, what does Maxwell say are the key ingredients to make that trust glue? Like, how do we make sure that trust is strong and lasts?
Well, Maxwell breaks it down into two really important things: consistent competence and consistent character. And he says that you need both of these if you want to be a good leader.
So it's like you can't just be a good person. You also need to be good at what you do. And the other way around, too. Like, just being good at your job isn't enough if nobody thinks you're a good person.
Right, you got it. So first, let's talk about competence. It's all about showing that you can do your job well as a leader. That means you have the skills and the knowledge and the experience to make the right calls and help your organization reach its goals.
And it's doing it consistently, right? Like, one good decision doesn't make you a good leader.
Exactly. You got to be good at it all the time. That's how people learn to trust your abilities.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, but then you said there's another part, too. Character.
Yes, competence alone isn't enough. You need character, too. So when we're talking about character, we're talking about integrity. It means doing the right thing even when it's hard, being honest and ethical. Basically, being someone that people can trust.
And in the video, Maxwell says something interesting. He says there's no such thing as business ethics. Like, ethics should be the same everywhere, not just at work.
I agree with that. You can't just turn your ethics on and off depending on where you are. What you do in your personal life also affects how people see you as a leader.
Yeah, it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Hmm.
So do you think those two things, competence and character, can they make up for each other? Like, what if someone's really good at their job, but they don't always do the right thing? Can they still be a good leader?
Maxwell is really clear about that. He says, no, you can't just have one or the other. You need both competence and character. He even says you wouldn't want to follow a leader who has high character but low competence, because you would end up trusting them to lead you in the wrong direction.
That's a good point. So even if someone has the best intentions, if they don't know what they're doing, they could really mess things up.
Yeah.
But how do we know how much trust glue we actually have as a leader? Is there any way to measure that?
Well, Maxwell has this great analogy in the video. He talks about trust like it's pocket change. It's such a cool way to picture how trust works and how easy it can be to lose trust.
Oh, yeah, I remember that from the video. That part really got me thinking. Can you explain how that analogy works?
Okay, so imagine you're a new leader at an organization. The organization, the people you're leading, they give you some change to start with. That's kind of like their initial level of trust in you.
So we all start with some trust to work with.
Exactly. Now, every time you do something that shows you're trustworthy, like you keep a promise or you do something that's good for the organization, you earn some more change.
Okay, I'm following you.
But every time you make a mistake or break a promise or do something that makes people lose trust in you, you lose some of that change. And here's the important part. You lose trust a lot faster than you gain it.
So it's like a leaky bucket. You might be trying to fill it with trust, but if you keep doing things that make people lose trust,
Yeah.
then it's going to leak out faster than you can fill it.
Exactly. And that brings up a really important question. How can we make sure that we're not walking around with empty pockets as leaders? How can we make sure that we have enough change to actually be good leaders?
It's a good question. I think that's something we should definitely talk more about. Like, what are some things we can do to build trust, earn more of that change, and make sure we're not losing it all the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. But before we get into that, I think we should talk about why we lose trust faster than we gain it. There's this thing called the negativity bias. It basically means that we're more sensitive to bad experiences than good ones.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, if someone lets us down even once, we remember that more than all the times they were good to us.
Exactly. And that negativity bias really affects how we see trust. Even one small mistake or broken promise can really hurt the trust that's been built up over time.
It's like a crack in a windshield. It might start small, but if you don't fix it, it can get bigger and bigger until the whole windshield is messed up.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid those cracks as leaders? How do we keep them from getting bigger and breaking the trust we've built with our team?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great place to start our next conversation.
I'm ready to keep going when you are.
All right, let's do it. Well, that's a really good question. And I don't think there's one simple answer to that. But one thing that I think is important is consistency. Like you were saying before, it's about walking the walk. It's about making sure your actions match your words so people can see that you're really serious about building trust.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So you're saying it's about proving to people that we're trustworthy by actually doing what we say we're going to do.
Exactly. And it's not just about the big things, even the small things matter, like showing up to meetings on time, or following through when you say you're going to do something, or being honest and transparent when you're talking to your team. All those little things add up, and they can make a big difference in whether people trust you or not.
I think I get it. So it's kind of like we're making deposits into that trust account with every small action we take.
Exactly.
And that reminds me of something that Maxwell said in the video. He talked about a CEO who gave his personal cell phone number to all of his employees and told them to call him directly if they were ever asked to do something unethical.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example. It might seem like a small thing, but it's actually a really big deal because it shows that the CEO is really serious about ethics, and it shows that he trusts his employees to do the right thing.
And it also makes it really clear that he's accessible. Like, he's not hiding behind layers of bureaucracy. He's willing to put himself out there and be available to his team.
Yeah, exactly. It creates this culture of trust where people feel comfortable speaking up because they know that they'll be heard and that their concerns will be taken seriously.
So it's not just about having rules and policies in place. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe and supported.
Right.
And where they trust their leader to do the right thing,
Right.
even when it's hard.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But what about when that trust is broken? Like, let's say a leader makes a mistake or does something that really hurts their team's trust. Can that trust ever be fully repaired?
That's a tough question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. It really depends on a lot of factors, like how bad was the thing that happened, and how willing are both sides to work on rebuilding the trust.
So there's no magic formula.
No, not really. It takes time and effort and patience, and even then, there's no guarantee that the trust can be fully restored.
So it's kind of like, once the trust is broken, it's never quite the same again.
It can be, but it takes a lot of work.
Okay, so let's say the trust has been broken. What's the first step to start repairing it?
Well, I think the most important thing is to acknowledge what happened. Don't try to sweep it under the rug or pretend like it didn't happen. Take responsibility for your actions and apologize sincerely.
And what do you mean by a sincere apology?
I mean a real apology. Not just saying I'm sorry if you were offended, but really owning up to your mistakes and letting people know that you understand how your actions affected them.
And then what? What do you do after you've apologized?
Well, then you need to start showing people that you're serious about rebuilding the trust. And you do that by consistently acting in a trustworthy way.
So it's like you're making those deposits into the trust account again.
Yeah, exactly.
But this time you're starting from a deficit.
Right.
So it's going to take even more effort to get back to a positive balance.
Exactly.
And it's probably going to take some time, too.
Definitely. Rebuilding trust isn't a quick fix. It's a long-term process.
I think that's a really important point because it can be easy to get discouraged when you're trying to rebuild trust, especially if it feels like it's taking a long time.
It can be frustrating, but it's important to remember that it's worth it. Because when you have trust, you can accomplish so much more as a team.
That's true. I mean, think about it. If you don't trust the people you're working with, it's going to be really hard to get anything done.
Yeah, you're going to be constantly second-guessing each other and wondering if people are really pulling their weight. It just creates a really negative and unproductive environment.
So trust is really the foundation of everything.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
It's the foundation of teamwork, of leadership, of success.
And that brings us back to Maxwell's law of solid ground. Trust is the foundation of leadership.
Yeah, if you don't have trust, you're building on sand.
Exactly.
And sooner or later, that foundation's going to crumble. So what are some things that leaders can do to make sure they're building on a solid foundation of trust?
That's a great question. And I think we should explore that in our next conversation.
Yeah, I'm ready to dive into some practical strategies for building and maintaining trust.
Me too.
So we've talked about how important trust is and the two big things that make it up, competence and character.
Yeah.
And we talked about how trust is like that pocket change analogy, how we're always either earning more of it or losing it.
Yeah, that analogy really sticks with you.
It does. So now let's talk about what we can actually do. Like, what are some practical tips for leaders to build trust and make sure we're not running around with empty pockets?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to remember that trust is built in those small moments, not just big gestures. It's about being consistent and dependable in those everyday things, like showing up on time, doing what you say you're going to do, being honest with your team.
So it's like proving that we're trustworthy through our actions, not just saying we're trustworthy.
Exactly.
And I think that also means being willing to admit when we're wrong
Yeah,
and to take responsibility when we make mistakes.
absolutely. Nobody's perfect. And people are much more likely to trust a leader who is real and approachable.
Yeah, someone who's human. And when you're working with a team, I think being a good listener is super important. Like really listening to what people are saying
Huh.
and making them feel heard and understood.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Active listening is huge. It's one of the best ways to show respect and build strong relationships with your team.
Because it shows that you actually care about what they have to say
Exactly.
and that their opinions matter to you.
And you know what else is really helpful? Asking for feedback. Don't wait for people to come to you with problems. Regularly check in with your team. Ask them how things are going. See if they have any suggestions or
That
concerns.
shows that you're open to learning and growing
Right.
and that you're willing to listen to different perspectives.
And it can also help you catch problems before they get too big.
It's like preventative maintenance for trust.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I like that.
And of course, don't forget to celebrate successes, both big and small.
Oh, yeah. That's so important. Recognizing and appreciating people's hard work. It can make a huge difference in how they feel about their job and their leader.
It's like you're giving them a little bonus in their trust account,
Exactly.
and that makes them more likely to trust you even more in the future.
Now, when trust has been broken, like we talked about before, repairing it takes time and patience.
And a lot of effort from everyone involved.
Yeah, it's not easy.
But it starts with owning up to your mistakes and apologizing.
And then you have to back up those words with actions
You got to show people that you've learned from your mistakes.
and that you're really committed to doing better.
It's like you're making those deposits back into the trust account,
Exactly.
one deposit at a time. And it might take a while to get back to where you were before.
But it's possible.
It is.
And it's worth it. Because strong relationships built on trust are essential for any team or organization to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the law of solid ground, I want to leave you with this question. How much change do you think you have in your pocket right now as a leader?
Are your pockets overflowing? Or are you scraping by?
And more importantly, what are you going to do to earn more of that change? How are you going to build those strong, trusting relationships? That will help you be the best leader you can be.
It's something for all of us to think about.
It is. And we'll keep exploring these ideas in future deep dives as we go through John Maxwell's other laws of leadership. So until next time, keep earning that change, keep building those relationships, and keep leading with integrity.
See you next time.